Smile, a horror movie about people with exaggerated smiles. Smile isn't your average cruddy PG-13 horror movie you would see all the teenagers flocking to the movie theater to go see, as its trailer would have suggested, and neither is its sequel, and the R rating allows for some pretty cool over-the-top scenes, but let's not get too ahead of ourselves. I've been meaning to cover Smile since I originally watched it back in 2023, but then I heard news of a sequel, so I waited, and here we are. Today we're going to be talking about Smile and Smile 2. Spoiler warning, I will be recapping and discussing both of the stories, so viewers beware. You're in for a scare or something. Anyway, 2022 Smile surprised me, while also being underwhelming, and its sequel does that, but even more so. Let me explain. Smile follows a psychologist, doctor, I don't know the exact role, named Dr. Rose Carter.
My name is Dr. Cotter.
We learn that Dr. Rose is a bit overqualified for this gig that she has at the hospital, but she seems to really care about people, so she puts off having a private practice. Not everyone can afford to see a shrink, so she takes pride in helping these underprivileged people.
Did you send a patient named Sarah Marquette over to residency yesterday?
Yes.
Rose, she has no insurance.
Okay, but she needs treatment.
The reasons revealed throughout the movie in flashbacks to Rose's childhood, where we see her mother is very mentally ill, like cuckoo, which causes her to be neglectful towards Rose and her sister. We see Rose talking to a few patients throughout the beginning of this movie until she meets a girl who is under a lot of duress, but claims she isn't crazy.
And the month?
October, I'm not crazy.
A crazy person saying they aren't crazy isn't abnormal, but what happens afterwards is. The girl explains her story saying that her college professor smashed his own face in with a hammer in front of her, very brutal, and that was very traumatic, to use very over and over again. But what's been happening to her since then may be even more traumatic. She's been seeing this entity around that takes the form of random people, but there's one very off thing about them, and it's mostly the fact that they're smiling, like grinning from ear to ear. And it doesn't just present itself as random strangers, it can also present itself as people that she knows, even people who aren't alive anymore. And you'd think that a person smiling with a giant grin from ear to ear is warming, like, oh, this is good. No, it looks malicious in a way. Now, I have a lot of complaints about the smiling that we will get to later. Right after explaining that, the girl starts freaking out, like crashing the hell out. Rose goes to call on the emergency phone to get some doctors in here to subdue her when she breaks a vase and then uses a piece of the vase to slash herself open while wearing a gigantically large, like almost comical smile on her face. Anyway, one weird eyeball transition later, and this movie does that in both movies a lot. A lot more than you'd think. We see Rose being questioned by two detectives. One of the detectives is a pretty key character in the story. Him and Rose have like some backstory that she's his ex-girlfriend. His name's Joel. After this questioning, which might I add, the police are just like, oh, it just sounds like a crazy bitch, huh? This movie can be very metaphorical to how people treat crazy people. What the fuck are you, crazy? Are you insane? Rose goes back home and we meet her husband, Trevor, who really seems to downplay the situation she went through today, saying something along the lines of, oh well, she wasn't really a patient of yours, you just met her. As if she didn't just cut her throat right in front of Rose, with a wicked grin on her face. Why do I complain about this? He does this all throughout the movie, as does every character surrounding Rose, which is the whole like, oh, downplaying mental illness, like what our society does. I hope that's what it's doing, because if not, it's terrible. I think a lot of the characters in this movie are kind of caricatures of upper class, kind of uppity people. They come off as extremely narcissistic and very condescending all throughout. At times in the movie it makes sense because Rose acts insane, but it's very over the top even during those. At home with Trevor, Rose is visibly shaken up, but she still goes to eat dinner with her husband and her sister's husband. This is where we get our first bits of their shallow characters. The next day, Rose decides to go back to work, which is crazy after witnessing what she just witnessed. She has a bit of an episode there because, of course, with a patient of hers, and the administrator of the hospital just sends her home, tells her she needs to take some time off for a week or two. We then see her going to a toy store to buy her nephew a present for his birthday. The only reason I bring this up, because this seems rather unimportant, is because it leads to a pretty wild scene at the kid's birthday party. Also, because because this is a horror movie, we need a scary moment more than once outside of the first 10 minutes of this movie. So she goes home and spooky things start happening. The security alarm goes off in her house. She looks around, can't see anything, turns the security alarm off. Whenever she turns it off, she notices the back sliding door left a little ajar. The security company calls her, and it seems pretty normal until they ask her this.
Are you alone in the house, ma'am?
Yes.
Are you sure?
What?
Are you sure you haven't let something inside, Rose?
This just turns out to be a sort of hallucination, and the cops show up and check the house out. They confirm no one broke in, but her husband manages to come home right while the cops are still there. He's extremely nonchalant about this, too. His wife just saw someone die in front of her yesterday while they were in her care, and their house may have been broken into, and their cat's missing, and his answer? Quit overreacting. Again, I understand how this movie's a metaphor for mental illness, but it makes the characters who aren't Rose and Joel absolute shit. Rose then begins to assume something is wrong with her, so she investigates the audio that she recorded while the patient slit her throat. This just leads to a jump scare. This jump scare is very solid. It got me the first time I watched it and the second time I watched it. It's after this jump scare and what she sees, she decides to heed her boss's advice. The next day, going to see a therapist. The conversation is pretty frustrating because Rose tries to diagnose herself since she's also a psychologist. It's then time for the nephew's birthday party. So let's finally talk about this wild scene. Rose shows up and she's looking really stressed out. Like, she continues to look more and more and more up the entire movie. She puts her present down next to all the others, spends little time at the birthday party, cake, singing, whatever you do at a child's birthday party. Then time comes to open up presents. When the kid opens up Rose's present, it just kind of stops for a minute. The kid just looks inside the box, confused, and then grabs this item by its neck and pulls it out, and we notice it's the missing cat. Inside the present is Rose's dead cat. Everyone freaks out, including Rose. Rose starts trying to tell everyone it shouldn't be in there, and she didn't put it in there, and she's not crazy, she swears. Of course, no one listens, and this is a point in the movie where I understand why everyone is being a dickhead. Because, like, you know how insane it is to put a dead cat inside of a fucking box and wrap the box and then give it to your nephew for his birthday. Then she falls into the table, like through it, cuts her arms up really bad, has to go to the hospital to get her arms stitched up or covered up. So now she looks even more insane because she has these really long, like, bandages on her arms. Her sister doesn't seem the least bit worried about her throughout this, which I find very strange. You can kind of understand why Rose's sister would be so tired of Rose because they both grew up with a crazy mother, so maybe her sister just deals with it in a bit of a different way. She just wants nothing to do with it. The scene is very over the top, and it's actually more funny than it is anything else. Now looking crazier than ever, Rose is in the car with her husband. This conversation she has with her husband is very funny. It's you crazy. But then he gets more unlikable, as does every character in the movie, including Rose, because we as an audience realize we cannot trust Rose's perspective because she's been hallucinating things. I mean, she just put a dead cat in a box when we thought she was putting a train in a box. She tries to talk to him. He just calls her crazy and then says that she's turning into her mother. This is understandable on both sides, but telling a woman that she's crazy and comparing her to her mother is probably the worst thing you could ever do. Very funny. It was good. I didn't think I'd ever laugh as hard as I did at a horror movie that isn't really comedy at all, but that moment is just like, oh, don't do that. She goes back home, starts researching some stuff about what the hell's going on with her. I mean, she's seeing smiling people who aren't there and is losing track of gigantic portions of time. During this research, she turns up news about her patient, college professor. It turns out that, yes, he smashed himself in the head with a hammer, but she looks into him and is able to find his wife, widow. She goes and meets his widow and learns a lot about the guy, and she kind of explains about how he acted when this started happening and how it progressed. Rose asks too many questions, and the widow just kicks her out of the house. Very, very mad at Rose, understandably. Now Rose, feeling completely isolated, like she doesn't have anywhere to go or anyone to talk to, she goes to meet her ex-boyfriend, the detective from the beginning of the movie, Joel. That's kind of a lie. She uses him so she can get access to the police computer. Women always using men for their bodies of work. Anyway, they start looking up names of the previous people this happened to, and they find this, just listing them together. I think they end up finding like 7 or 8 names, and it's always just a person dying at their own hands in front of another person in a really traumatic up way. So it's like a disease, but it's spread through someone's death.
Rose, who are these people?
This idiot is literally working on the case and still can't put it together. With all this information in tow, Rose goes back home where her husband understandably pulls an intervention on her with her psych doctor. She leaves all pissy and tries to make up with her sister, but this is when her sister just isn't having any of it.
Holly, can I talk to you just for 1 second?
No, I
Can I
don't think
please
she
talk
should
to
be
you?
here. I don't think this is a good idea, honestly. So,
it's fine. It's
Holly,
fine.
I don't
Just
think.
go the fuck
All right,
inside.
fine.
The modern state of man. Rose acts like a complete whack job though while talking to her sister. She pulls out the crime scene photos related to all these people's deaths and just starts showing her sister all these bloody pictures, which I mean, if somebody just gave your kid a dead cat for their birthday and then shows up to your house with a bunch of gruesome crime scene photos, I'd also say, hey bitch, get the out or I'm calling the police. Rose storms off like every crazy woman would do when they get called crazy. As soon as she gets in the car, Joel calls her, lets her in on some new info. He managed to dig back in his ultra crime database detective computer and find 22 previous victims, all of them having died with this curse, except one, who somehow managed to murder somebody and pass the curse on that way. They go talk to him at the prison, and understandably, when Rose tells him that she has the curse, he flips the out and is like, why the fuck did you bring this to me, bitch? And like, he does let us know some interesting things though. He talks about how he found other cases this happening all over the world, and he got the idea for murdering somebody to pass it on from a case in Brazil, and it ended the chain that way. He pretty much tells us it passes through trauma, and Rose has two options. She can either die or kill someone else. I'd think that this would be a pretty good time to start planning a murder scheme, but Rose doesn't do that. Now that the clock is ticking, Rose goes back home, pretty much just for this scene with the doctor.
Almost time, Rose.
So the doctor is waiting for Rose when she gets home, and she sits down and talks to her for a minute, but then she gets a call on her phone and answers it, and it's the doctor asking her how she's doing, and she's surprised she answered the phone. And then we see the doctor who's sitting in the house, same people by the way, just smiling at her, and then she starts talking in this really dumb, deep voice that sounds electronic. It's bad. It's probably the worst part of this movie. I'm assuming this was meant to be a scary scene, a horrific scene, but the way the voice sounds and just this woman smiling the way that she does, it's a weird, like, kind of just bitchy smile. I don't know how to explain it. It makes it stupid. Straight out of stupid land. The next scene feels like it was either meant to pad out the runtime or make the ending of the movie feel like it didn't come out of nowhere. Let me explain. She goes to the hospital and we see her go in and kill her patient. Yeah, it just turns out to be fake. Like, this didn't happen. It was a hallucination. There's like no point in this other than to add another bloody scene, but you kind of feel like it's really fake the whole time you're watching it. I think that this is meant for like really stupid people in the audience. They just kind of have to be shown something like this. They need to understand that she hallucinates and loses time and sees shit that's not there. I don't know how that came across, but this scene just felt really stupid. It was so unnecessary. Rose really isn't the kind of person to murder anyone, too, the way that they show her throughout the movie. She heads off to her childhood home, which is out in the middle of the woods and really decrepit, in order to escape everyone so that this thing can't kill her in front of somebody. Like, she could just fight it and die, and then the chain stops, right? How much she cares about people. A house off in the middle of the woods that's decrepit is also the perfect place to finish a horror film. To start these scenes off inside the home, we get a ton of background knowledge of Rose's life growing up that we didn't see before via the flashbacks. Then the entity kind of appears to her as her mother, and they start talking a bit. This is where we also learn a little bit about Rose and her mother's relationship. Like, one of the biggest things we learn is that Rose pretty much let her mother overdose and die because she was just really tired of dealing with her mom. You can't really blame an 11-year-old for that. So this entity already seemed attracted to people who have trauma, wants people with a lot of trauma so he can grab onto them and feed off that trauma. Whatever. I can honestly say that when this thing appears to be her mother and shifts into a giant and walks her down, it's really well done. Even though the giant may have a stupid voice, I think that the weird effect that they have in order to make the person look like a freaky giant, pretty cool. The end of the movie is kind of creepy. There's these awesome practical effects used throughout the entire ending of this, which are awesome. It reminds me a lot of like The Thing. You know, before they had CGI, they really had to rely on a lot of practical effects, and there's a sort of realness that you get out of it that you don't get out of CGI, especially badly done CGI. Don't get me wrong, it looks fake, but it doesn't look as fake as the CGI can look. And you gotta know how much time a makeup artist and designer spent making it. Rose's only source of light in this house, a lantern, so she catches the monster on fire. This looks cool when it turns into like a giant bloody flaming skeleton thing. I'm pretty sure I can show it. She then leaves the house thinking it's all over. She goes to her ex-boyfriend's house, but it's all just a hallucination, and she gets teleported right back in front of the house. Joel does this really stupid smiling thing at her, like, I'm the entity, with a stupid voice too. Whenever she teleports back to the decrepit house, it turns out that Joel decided to follow her out to the house, so she just runs straight back inside, not wanting him to contract whatever this curse is. Which, by the way, the demon seems to be able to go anywhere and take Rose anywhere that it wants to, so it doesn't make any sense for a big portion of these movies why it does these things, other than the fact that it works well for a movie. In there, we get a showdown where the practical effects absolutely shine. The giant demon thing's skin peels off and it just turns into this muscly, gross looking thing. It's super disgusting looking. It's gore and practical effects done really well in the modern era. Really like this. It then crawls down her throat where you can see that somebody obviously made a little thing of Rose to have the demon crawl into. It stretches out. It's really cool. It's by far the best scene in the movie, which makes up for the slow shit throughout the movie. So yeah, it crawls down Rose's throat. Then we see Joel break inside. He sees Rose just standing in the corner of the room. She dumps gasoline on herself. She then turns around to face Joel, and she has a match and a matchbook in her hand. She strikes the match and stands there looking at him for a minute before burning herself. I'd like to point out that if you're covered in gasoline, you wouldn't be able to strike a match and hold it, then smile at someone for a few moments. You'd instantly incinerate. It's a cool scene, I guess, but what I would have done differently is I would have had Rose light herself on fire and then stand there smiling while burning. The movie ends with Joel watching Rose die, so it passed on to him, leaving an opportunity for a sequel that the studio cashed in on pretty quickly. Anyway, Smile is a decent horror movie that was a lot better than I originally expected from the trailer or even from hearing what people said about it, but it definitely has a lot of problems. The most obvious one is how slow it feels. Watching the movie made it feel like it was more like 2 hours and like 30 minutes, 2 hours 45 minutes, and the runtime is just below 2 hours. I think the best parts are Rose uncovering information on the curse, and a few scary moments stand out, but a lot of the scenes in between with like Rose's sister, her husband, or the therapist really make this movie worse in every way. The idea itself is very The Ring or just about any other curse movie. The genre is and doesn't tend to have many scares. I don't know how to feel about the ending where she dies. Is it cliche to have a bad ending in a horror movie, or is it cliche to have a good ending in a horror movie? Taking into consideration how much I dislike every character in this movie that isn't Rose or Joel, and the reliance on jump scares for horror, because by the way, there's no horror in this movie other than jump scares. This movie isn't in the slightest scary. I'd say you could argue that one scene in particular in this movie is scary. I think the ending could be scary for some people, and I think the scene where she's home alone and her alarm goes off, her security alarm goes off, I think that scene could possibly be pretty tense. But other than that, there's like no horror in the movie. Like there's a scene where she has something crazy happen and she just jumps into bed and turns the lights off and goes to sleep. Like if you just see a person in your house that has a smile and looks like a demon, you're just gonna turn the lights off, jump in bed, and go to sleep. Okay, man. This movie's also extremely generic. The ending, awesome. I read several reviews of the movie, and a lot of reviews complained about the ending. They said it was one of the worst endings ever. I guess normies really didn't like or didn't care for the practical effects, which is my favorite part. I don't understand that. And it breaks the slow dreariness of the movie. Smile, would I watch it again? Recommend it to anyone? No. Did I have a decent time watching it? Yeah, it was entertaining. And honestly, that's kind of all I expect from a horror movie like this. I think I'm gonna give this movie 4 out of 10. I think that's fair given my grievances. So that leads us to Smile 2. Before we talk about Smile 2 though, this is my obligatory call to action. If you're enjoying the video and my low rating of Smile didn't make you give the video a thumbs down and cry in the comments, I'd really appreciate it if you'd thumbs up the video and subscribe to the channel. If you have an idea of what you'd want me to cover next or anything you'd want me to talk about, leave a comment down below and let me know. Back to the video. Smile 2. I didn't really plan on watching Smile 2 after first seeing Smile. It was actually a couple months after the movie had come out that I finally gave it a watch. I just assumed that if they made a sequel, it would be worse than the original. And the reviews about the movie and hearing people talk about how they liked the movie and how it was good, I checked it out, especially after my friend kept telling me about how much he liked the movie. After hearing that and seeing how high it was rated on IMDb, that's how this video came to be. Smile 2 starts off a week after the first left off, opens up with Joel sitting in a car looking really, really, really sad. Just a sad guy. I mean, I've been there, bro. It gets better. Immediately we realize that Joe doesn't have much time left because it's a week later, and you know, this demon usually kills people within a week without the phone call though. Anyway, Joel gets out of the car and starts walking towards this, like, crack house, best way I can describe it. And while walking up, we see this Porsche pull up, this red one, and a guy gets out of it, walking up to the house. Joel comes up behind him, puts a gun to his head, and tells him to go inside. There's also this little cool scene where Joel looks over, and we see Rose from the first movie on fire, which, I mean, all these people, the demon shows the people that they saw, so Joel's seeing her. Which has to be a crazy thing to see your ex-girlfriend on fire. I know some people who probably have caught their ex-girlfriends on fire, so maybe not everyone would hate to see that. Joel certainly would. So Joel ain't choosing death, it turns out. He takes the guy inside and to murder him to get rid of this demon. If you're wondering, these guys are drug dealers. So Joel's plan is to murder a crappy criminal and pass it on. The problem is Joel's little plan quickly goes to heck in a very spectacular way. I don't know how much of this I can show because this movie is bloody as hell, like way bloodier than the first movie. So Joel murders one of the drug dealer guys. He shoots him in front of his brother, but things spiral out of control and he ends up having to kill the brother who he was trying to pass it on to. And a car pulls into the driveway and they aren't very happy. Did I also forget to mention the guy in the room that managed to see it all go down? Well, he has the curse now. Things keep spiraling. Joel escapes the house, narrowly dodging bullets, but then he gets hit by a truck. His whole body explodes. It's really gross. It's after Joel is dead that we start watching daytime television with like Drew Barrymore. The guest on this talk show happens to be our main character. Her name in the movie is Sky Riley, and she's a gigantic pop star. Imagine like Taylor Swift or Ariana Grande or whoever else is popular. And just a few months before this, Sky was in a car accident while hopped up on drugs, and her actor boyfriend were in the car, and her actor boyfriend died. We see throughout the movie her having like scars on her body where she's went through some surgery, so she was obviously pretty by the crash too. So we are just in time to witness her comeback. After she's on the show, we see her doing a really long, boring dance rehearsal. This is a very long scene, and unless you're into dancing, I don't know why you'd like it. During this, we see that Sky has like recurring back pain from her accident. The whole point of this is so that she can drop a pain pill down the drain, and now she's out, and she has to get some more drugs. Guess what? Because of her history with drug abuse, she can't get them from the doctor. She texts her old dealer and he tells her to come by. When she gets there, we realize it's the guy from the drug den in the beginning with Joel, and he looks really bad.
What the Louis?
What do you want from me?
Vicodin just for pain, same as last time.
Fuck that, Sky Riley!
Your text said to come over.
What?
When she walks in, she notices that he has been medicating his curse with cocaine, which sounds like a pretty crazy combination. This scene where he goes back into a different room to grab her pills for her while she's sitting in his house is really tense. I really like this scene. Anyway, he comes out acting crazier, like he didn't know what she just said, and then he suddenly starts smiling. We know the title of the movie, man. Smile. That smile comes back like an old familiar friend, and then he proceeds to smash his face in with a barbell plate. It's extremely graphic, and I cannot show it. I don't think there's any way to blur a person's skull showing through their face and just crazy scene. But I do want to say I like how this movie's much darker and more gory than the last movie. I'm not even really a big fan of gore, but it fits this movie, because it at least adds something like, ew. With the dealer now dead in front of Sky, Sky stands there in shock for a few moments, before abruptly vomiting and running out of there. Or promptly vomiting. She can't call the cops because that would be an absolute media disaster. How would you even explain this in the first place? Like, yes, officer, he smashed his face in with a plate in front of me. She goes home, still freaked out, barely able to sleep, but she has a very busy day tomorrow. A photo shoot, which is very similar to this whole dance recital, dance routine, practice, whatever you want to call it. It's boring and useless unless you're into pop stars. At this photo shoot, she at least starts like hallucinating a little bit. She's seeing the drug dealer guy just smiling at her. Now we know for sure that she has the curse because of this, and this is where the movie starts to get pretty interesting. The movie's very good at portraying a pop star having like an absurd downfall. Normal, non-famous people get like a really good glimpse at what it's like to have a Britney Spears crash out. What the movie doesn't do well is be scary or creepy for the most part. Like when she's doing this meet and greet with fans after the photo shoot, and the demon shows up pretending to be this little girl that just smiles there really awkwardly and doesn't say anything. We've seen this like 30, 40 times by now throughout these first two movies. The smiling isn't creepy anymore, nor was it really ever, other than the very first moment of the movie. However, this movie does show me that being ultra famous looks really terrible. Having people obsessed with you could be pretty chilling. Like having a fan living under your house would be scary. Anyway, back at her apartment, things get out of hand. She's straight up hallucinating this fella chasing her around her house. This gets her to call an old friend of hers who she hasn't spoken to since the accident. This person kind of cut her off. And we can see based off the text that Skye was probably one of the worst people to have ever lived before the accident, which she doesn't seem that way in this movie. Like she's actually trying to change, but she was just kind of a piece of work. Her friend arrives just in time too, because a guy in his whitey tighties with a smile is chasing her to the door. Skye explains everything to her friend. I should probably figure out her friend's name in the movie before I continue. Anyway, after Skye explains everything to Gemma offers to stay the night with her, and everything's good, other than a really bland nightmare that's like a hallucination that Skye has while she's sleeping. But she ends up sleeping in late and awakes from this nightmare. You know, she has a busy schedule. She's a pop star. This section of the movie just drags, by the way. She leaves for more preparations of her tour. I guess we could talk about the character that kind of makes this interesting. It's her mother, who's her manager and tries to keep her on track. Only problem is Skye isn't having like a pop star crash out where she's on drugs. Like Skye's cursed, and her mother doesn't understand. So when Skye loses her shit, her mom just assumes like, oh, you on coke? You drunk? Something like that. While she's doing this thing, she flips out because she thinks her friend's fucking with her. She goes to check her room because like he walks past her twice, so the entity's pretending to be him. She goes and checks her room where he's walking from, and it's all destroyed, so she thinks it was him, but it was actually just her, and she's hallucinating this stuff. Her mom comes in, she's like, what the Skye, what are you doing? Blah, 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 blah. The scene's very loud, grating. Skye's kind of annoying here, and this is going to keep happening. Like I said, the only interesting part is watching someone who has so much at stake almost ruin their life. There's a scene that is way too long and just very uncomfortable to watch, not scary, that happens after this. I don't know if you'd call it cringe, but I think that's the best way to describe it. She has to read this speech for disenfranchised kids because her mom's pissed off at her. She just destroyed this room, and she promised this one guy that she'd do it, right? So it's like a charity. While she's there all dressed up, about to read this speech, which is already written for her, and all she has to do is read off the teleprompter. The teleprompter's messing up, which, you know, it probably isn't. It's the entity messing with her brain. What ensues is like her freaking the out and talking about things that she shouldn't be talking about. All the while, there's someone just smiling up at her. At this point in the movie, I was completely over the smiling shit. I've been over the smiling shit. Stop it. I get the movie's called Smile, but this is over the top. Because of how uncomfortable this scene is, the smiling person is almost there as comedic relief. You'd probably like this scene if you were like into getting off on other people's suffering. Like a psychopath would really like this scene. I, on the other hand, don't enjoy watching people ruin their lives. If you're a sadistic this is probably your favorite scene in the movie. I find this scene not fun to watch. Very cringe. It hurts to watch. Anyhow, after this, she runs out of the place and like realizes how bad she just up, and she gets a phone call from this random unknown number that's been texting her throughout the movie. She answers the call and they tell her to meet her at a bar in the city. I mean, she just has a smiling person sitting there smiling at her, and this teleprompter went on. She's down on her luck. She's rock bottom right now. She goes and meets this person, not knowing who they are. They talk for a bit, and he explains that he thinks he's found a way to stop this curse, where she doesn't have to die or kill anyone. He thinks that he can freeze her so that her heart stops, and she dies for like a very short period of time, but then he could hit her with some adrenaline and bring her back. And he thinks that the curse will be gone when she's resuscitated. She listens to him for a bit, but then acts like a complete and total bitch and makes a giant scene in the bar, and everyone realizes it's Skye, so they're like, Skye Riley? Oh my god! And she just has to run out, as if her reputation can really handle any more tanking at this point. When Skye arrives back home, hits the fan some more, and a bunch of smiling people just attack her for a very long time. This scene feels like 10 minutes of people smiling and walking around in like a really dumb, choreographed way. Like, it's meant to be really abnormal, like, what, this person's walking around like this, man. I feel like when you're watching it, it looks like one of those like cringe flash mobs from back in like the 2010s. I really didn't like that when it was happening, and I don't like it at all now. She gets worked pretty badly by these smiling people though. Her hair gets torn out. She gets the shit kicked out of her, punched and kicked and stuff. And then at some point, one of them fist her throat, just shoves their whole arm down her throat, which is cool. I think this is like meant to be like a really dumb symbolism, this whole scene, because like all dragging her down. of like the pressure that her fans weighing her down in society because of fame. I hope I'm wrong because that'd be pretty dorky, but I feel like that's what the director was going for. It's after the fist fucking, I don't know how many times I can say that in a row, of her throat, that we get some cool flashbacks. Here we see Sky and her dead boyfriend cool is not the word, driving down the road, arguing. They're very intoxicated. They're doing blow in the car while they're speeding down the Hollywood Hills, like around corners and shit. At the end of the argument, we end up seeing Sky take the wheel and drive them off, trying to murder both of them, which is pretty heavy. I really like the reveal of why Sky is the way she is and kind of showing how big of a piece of shit she used to be. It kind of leaves you as the audience hoping that she can somehow redeem herself from this. It also really shows the trauma that she had and why this entity would like her. It didn't really make me dislike her anymore, which is kind of strange. I guess I never really cared about her in the first place, but it gave her some depth. Like, she's an interesting character. The scene of them in the car is just really hard to watch. That kind of like toxicity, like relationship, like that relationship was beyond fucked. Kind of makes your skin crawl. The only problem is after the flashback, Sky wakes up in this private hospital, this wellness center, and the movie starts driving off a cliff itself. Just a complete nosedive. If the movie's ending were a little better, I think I'd like this, in hindsight. I think I'd like this part of the movie more. But the ending, we'll get there. Wow. I can't say that this part entirely is bad. I think the wellness center part's actually pretty cool. When she wakes up, her mother explains what happened and how she's gonna stay here for a while till she gets better before she can go back to her tour prep. They get in a very heated argument after this, where Sky murders her mother. It's not like that though. The entity like really with her head and makes her think that her mom is the entity and gonna her up. So she kills her mom and then realizes it's her mom and freaks out. Sky tries to like leave the hospital. She's about to go to prison for the rest of her life. So Sky makes an escape. She runs out and there's blood covering her hospital gown. Very noticeable. But she makes it almost all the way out before somebody decides to talk to her and make a scene. To which point she reacts by grabbing a security officer's gun and holding them up and saying, "Fuck off, get out," and shooting bullets in the air and stuff, like a botched robbery. She runs out of the building, gun in tow, and ends up seeing her friend Gemma down the street. Gemma's like, "What the is going on? Why do you have a gun? Why are you covered in blood? Why are you running from people?" "I'm not leaving you, I'll take you." So they both steal a security guard's car. Maybe it's like one of Sky's private driver's car, not sure. They steal the car and drive off, Gemma driving. So I like the movie up to that point. I think this little getaway, her killing her mom, it feels kind of dumb because you were just like, wow, maybe Sky can redeem herself. Then she wakes up and instantly murders her mom. Wow, great job, movie. Her escaping, the gun thing, very over the top. I like it. This next part kind of starts to kill the movie. During the car ride, she calls the guy who's supposed to be doing this freezing thing, and he tells her, "Okay, we can meet at this pizza place." Then she starts hallucinating really bad. These hallucinations are meant to come off as like a, "Aha, we fooled you," but they just really suck. It turns out her friend Gemma was never actually there. Like, never there the whole movie. She never answered Sky's text, so it was the entity the whole time. Wowee, man. That was fucking dumb. That kind of kills the movie. So Sky's driving all erratically to this rundown pizza shop and meets the guy. Like, that's kind of how quick it goes. You're like, oh shit, big reveal. Then, oh, let's fix this thing. Let's turn this around. He preps her in the freezer and explains what he's gonna do. Really cold in there. And then the demon shows up and she has a showdown with the demon. I don't even know if the guy who's meant to freeze her and save her is real or not. I'm questioning whether anybody in this movie's real. She just has this showdown with the demon. It doesn't work. It's not scary. It's pretty stupid. I say stupid a lot, but this is just textbook kind of stupid. I don't know why the demon would even allow her to go to the freezer like this. Actually, I don't know if any of this is real. I think this is all hallucination. This whole thing we're experiencing right now is a hallucination. Because let me explain how the ending ends. She kicks the demon's ass and then appears in front of a bunch of fans in an arena. And you see her mom and her assistant there. That's all there, so she didn't actually kill her mom. Then it just goes to, like, see the audience, and you hear her stabbing herself in the face with the microphone. You don't get to see any of that. The camera turns to her when she collapses on the ground, which is stupid. You've shown so much, you can't show that. Then she, like, splits in half, and this monster thing comes out of her. This ending sucks. The whole point of the demon is trying to, like, make it to where everyone in the crowd gets infected by this curse, right? But like, it's so we already knew that was gonna happen. Like, if you make a movie about a pop star, this is the first ending everyone thinks of. Oh, it's gonna have her die in front of the crowd, so it can infect. That's the first thing. It's the easiest thing. You saw this ending coming from a mile away, and the showdown in the freezer all being fake makes zero sense. Why would you even do that? It just pads out the runtime. I guess you're trying to leave everyone who hoped that she survived hanging on. The ending felt like it came out of nowhere too. You're from the freezer instantly in front of a crowd, no explanation. Really trash ending. Every scene with the entity in this movie is the worst scenes in the movie. The best parts of the movie is watching her struggle, like, to try to turn her life around as this, like, curse is starting to slowly build up. So you can kind of see this dilemma in her character where she's trying to become a better person, but then this entity is with her. That's the horror of this movie is, oh god, this sucks. You're rooting for her and then it gets worse and worse. So the scene at the teleprompter makes sense because you're like, oh, don't do this. This is terrible. This is going to look so bad. All the trash smiling in the movie, can't stand it. I'm never watching another smile movie again. Somebody smiling with this malicious look on their face isn't scary. I'm done with it. I'm done with it. The ending was very rushed, really piss poor. All the things that weren't happening that were actually hallucinations felt like that scene in the first movie of Rose going into the hospital and murdering that guy and that not being real. It's just like, why are you putting this in the movie? The movie is very, very fun at times, and the idea is certainly extremely interesting, putting this in the shoes of a pop star. It held my attention much more than the first Smile, and it was a lot less boring than the first Smile. Even if you add like dance choreography and the photo shoot scenes and stuff, Sky's character and the people around her are just a lot more interesting than Rose in the first movie. The beginning of the movie, the first scene, really fun. I'd say like the first act of this film is really, really good. I thought this movie was going to be great after I watched that. There was a lot of stuff I really don't like about this movie. I think it tried something very different that the first movie didn't try, so it's automatically a bit better. The first movie's ending's the best part of it. This movie's beginning's the best part of it. You're kind of flipping those around. And then which one was more entertaining throughout? Obviously, Smile 2 is more entertaining. It's telling a story I don't think I've ever seen in a horror film, whereas Smile just felt like an average horror movie. After a long deliberation, I've decided to give this movie a 5 out of 10. I really like the first act, even the lead up to the ending, but the ending falls so far off of a cliff, I couldn't imagine giving this movie anything higher. As to not tear the butt plug out of all these angry people, though, I have to stick it at a 5. I can't go any lower. I was talking to my friend about these movies, and I told him what my ratings were going to be for this video, and he's like, that's crazy, you're rating it so low. I don't see how people could rate these any higher than that. He was acting like these movies were great, like 8 out of 10s. I don't know what else to add. These movies are okay. I'm not upset that I watched them, but I am surprised that they made as much money as they did. I think the first Smile box office like $90 million or something. That probably more. $217 million worldwide. That's insane. $138 million for the second one. That was the video. I watched Smile 1 and Smile 2. If you enjoyed the video, drop me a like, subscribe to the channel. I had fun watching these movies. Let me know how you felt about the video down below. If you disagree with me, write a scathing opinion piece that I'm sure will make me laugh. And if you also felt a bit let down by this second movie after hearing all the hype that it got, let me know down below. As always, thank you for watching, or whatever. Thank you guys for watching. Peace.